in the state to extract that resource. It's also great from a cost perspective. Currently, when we look at the economics, fueling a vehicle using compressed natural gas should cost the consumer less than half of what current gasoline prices are. So great from a consumer cost perspective. And from an environmental perspective, compressed natural gas is about half the emissions profile of gasoline. So we think it's a real win. Now, of course, what's the role for government? The state budget's not in a position where we're in a position to throw money at it. And the governor, in any case, is kind of cheap when it comes to taxpayer dollars. He's not interested in throwing money at problems. And so in our office, we've been thinking more fundamentally about what the market failures are that are preventing adoption. This is an economical technology today, but it's not widespread. Why is that? And so we've identified 3 market failures that are preventing the adoption of CNG, or 3 market barriers, I should say, that are preventing adoption of CNG as a transportation fuel. And working on those 3 failures is what my office is focused on. So the first failure is a chicken-egg issue. Folks aren't investing in the infrastructure for fueling if they don't know there's a market out there of vehicles to be fueled by that infrastructure. And of course, no one wants to buy a vehicle they don't know where they can fuel. So helping coordinate the industries, helping coordinate the fleets, and figure out how to get the staged investment in a way that is going to minimize the risk for the private sector is one of the areas of focus. Again, no taxpayer dollars. It's primarily through coordination and getting the right parties to the table. The second issue is that we don't have currently very many off-the-assembly line CNG-ready vehicles. Typically what happens on medium-duty trucks is someone buys a vehicle off the assembly line, ready to run on gasoline, and then they have to go get it retrofit to run off CNG. The reason for that is the manufacturers have not felt a commitment currently. They looked at this in the past, but the economics and performance weren't there. Technology has since advanced. But the manufacturers, the Fords, the GMs, the Chryslers, have not made a commitment to produce vehicles off the assembly line, even though we think it would make sense, and there is a market for that if they would do that. So one of the things that we're working on is coordinating with a number of states and with local government to put a request for proposal out to the automobile manufacturers for off-the-assembly line, ready-to-be-used vehicles. And we think by aggregating demand, we can send that market signal to the manufacturers so they'll start taking this seriously and perhaps make that investment. A third market failure we have is one that's relatively unique to Colorado, and it has to do with the way our electric power tariff is set up. The fueling infrastructure for compressed natural gas requires compressors. Compressors have a lot of peak demand, instantaneous demand. They'll run for 5-10 minutes at 40 horsepower. The way that we charge those fueling stations for the electricity makes it very, very difficult for them to put a fueling station in and pay that cost with just a relatively few number of gallons. So they have about, let's say, $10,000 of electric charges associated with turning those compressors on, and they get charged that every month. And if they don't sell if they only sell a couple gallons, they got to spread that $10,000 over that couple gallons. And so we've been working with the utilities to understand if there's ways that we can help alleviate that, at least in the short term, until we get the demand up. The result of this market failure is that while in some places that have different regulatory structures, we see compressed natural gas at $1.25 a gas gallon equivalent, in Colorado we're seeing it between $2.50 and $3.50 per gas gallon equivalent. So we believe that we can drive that cost separation between natural gas and oil or gasoline much greater through some relatively simple economic development type tariffs. And tariff is just the billing structure for the way that the compression stations will pay the utilities. And by doing that, we can help spur the market, and then eventually the price separation will grow on its own. Won't need any help from a change in that structure. The third area of focus is around energy efficiency. Again, we've identified 3 market barriers that prevent the investment in energy efficiency we'd otherwise see in a perfect market. The first couple are things that are primarily outside of what we're focused on. The first is that the discount rate people use when thinking about energy efficiency is much higher than the discount the utilities and the PUC use to make investment decisions. So for example, if I'm going to think about putting insulation in my house or weather stripping my house, I might use a 30% or a 50% discount rate. Meanwhile, the utility is deciding to build new power plants at a 7% discount rate. So the utility and the PUC get together and they create demand-side management programs to help alleviate or help deal with that market barrier. And our role is primarily to watch and provide best practice and commentary on that. Another market failure is we have externalities, and we have emissions and the like that are not priced into what we pay for power. Now, those issues are primarily dealt with at the federal level with the EPA. They're dealt with a little bit at the PUC. But again, that's not primarily the state's role to come in and price those externalities explicitly through regulation. But we do pay attention to that, and we do want to be conscious of what's going on in that regard. The third market failure, though, is one that there's no natural other entity to deal with. And so we're stepping up and trying to fill that gap. That market failure is the fact that energy performance is typically not reflected in property values. If we have home A that's a high energy performer and home B that's a low energy performer, that difference in performance and therefore difference in operating cost is not typically reflected or is actually not at all reflective in a quantitative way in home prices. And so we've been working with the realtor community, the appraiser community, and soon with the underwriters. No, that's cell phone. Sorry. So we're working with the elements of the community and the buyers and the sellers to better understand how we can demonstrate to the market that there's a real profit opportunity for folks. One thing that's interesting that's happened at the national level has been, should I use a different mic? One thing that's what's happened at the national level is Senator Bennett has just recently introduced a piece of legislation, I think it was yesterday or the day before. Thanks, okay. Called the, much better, thank you, called the SAVE Act. Oh. Maybe it's just me. Must be. So is that okay, or should I just yell? All right. So the SAVE Act. And the SAVE Act is going to help address the underwriter issue by requiring at the time of closing information about utility performance to be included in the closing documents. Now, it's not mandating that the banks create a financing program, but instead it's just saying we want to collect this data. And hopefully some enterprising bankers will say, I've got this new source of data. Let me correlate that to default rates and see if there is actual value in being able to encourage energy efficiency by providing energy efficiency mortgages or other types of lending products to help finance these types of investments. The fourth and fifth areas I'll just go through pretty quickly and open up for questions that we're going to focus on in the short term is we want to promote the energy innovation ecosystem here in Colorado. We've got the National Renewable Energy Lab, which has been a great resource. Having that resource was a big part of why we were able to get GE to announce that they were going to locate or invest in a new photovoltaic manufacturing facility in Aurora. 350 jobs, $400 million of investment. We're really excited about that new opportunity. But it's actually been, there's a lot more to the solar energy cluster here in the state of Colorado. And there's lots of other interesting things that are happening in other elements of the energy sector, whether it be in oil and gas production or in scrubber technology for coal plants, wind energy, and the like. We want to make sure with all the resources that we have available that we are acting in a way that's coordinated and is shortening the time from idea to commercialization and minimizing the cost from idea to commercialization and really help boost the energy innovation ecosystem here in the state. And the final of the five is we want to increase or we want to promote the access to information about our energy sector. Sometimes I like to say, I don't know if there's any elected officials here today or any state legislators. I don't recognize any, but there might be. But there's a lot of silly arguments that happen under the dome over at the Capitol, I guess over that way. And we're really trying to, we think smart debate is fantastic. We really encourage it. We understand there's different values and there's different thought processes that go into what our energy policy should look like. But we want to make sure that we're having that conversation at the highest level. And so we want to create access to unbiased information to help guide policy direction. And not just for legislators, but for the media and for the public, for business leaders, and the like. Besides those top five, we also work on transmission issues. We run a low-income weatherization assistance program, and we run some programs that help boost the efficiency of state and local governments, energy performance contracting systems, energy performance contracting programs, and the like. So that's the big picture. I think the key difference and the key focus that we're trying to instill is a more open process, more transparency, more analytics, and more of a market focus in how we think about the energy sector and help drive that forward. And with that, I'll open it up to questions for a few minutes.
TJ, can I ask you to move to this mic, and then we've got two mics we can use in the audience. Thank you.
Thanks. Just watch yours.
We had about
Yeah.
when